Welcome to this tutorial on passing variables to HTML using Flask. In this video, we'll be covering the following topics: setting up a basic Flask application, creating routes and rendering HTML templates, passing variables from Flask to HTML using Jinja2 templating, using conditionals and loops in Jinja2 templates, and finally, handling forms and user inputs in Flask. By the end of this tutorial, you will have a solid understanding of how to pass variables from Flask to HTML and create dynamic web applications. So let's get started. Alright, let's get started by installing Flask. Open your terminal and run this command to install Flask: pip install Flask. Once that is done, we're going to create a new file called app.py. This is where we will write the code for our basic Flask app. Let me show you what goes inside. First, we import Flask class from the Flask module. This class is the core of Flask app, and it helps us set up the routes and handle the web requests. Next, we create an instance of the Flask class with app equals Flask_name. This is a special Python variable that gets passed into the app. It tells Flask to use the current module name, so it knows where to look for templates and static files. Then we define a route for the root URL. This is done with the app.route decorator. This line tells Flask that when someone visits the home page or root of our site, it should run the index function. Inside the index function, we simply return the string hello world. This is what the user will see when they open our web page in the browser. Finally, this bit runs the Flask application, so when we run the app.py file, Flask starts the development server and serves our web page. Now let's run our application. Open up your terminal, navigate to the directory where app.py is located, and run this command: python app.py. And there you go. You should see hello world displayed in your browser. That's it. We've now got a basic Flask application up and running. Next up, let's take things a step further by creating a route that renders an HTML template. First, create a new folder in your project directory called templates. Inside that folder, create a new file called index.html. Now let's add some basic HTML to index.html. Here is what it should look like. This is a very simple HTML template. We define the document type as HTML5 at the top. In the head section, we set the title of the page to by Flask app. The body contains a h1 header tag that says welcome to Python Central. This is what we render when a user visits our web page. Next, we need to update our app.py file so that it renders the HTML template when the root URL is accessed. Here is the updated code. Now let's break this down. First, we import render_template from Flask. This is the function we use to render our HTML templates. Next, in our index function, we replace the simple return welcome to Python Central with return render_template index HTML. What this does is tell Flask to look for the index.html template inside the templates folder and render it when the route is accessed. So instead of just sending a plain string to the browser, we are sending an entire HTML page, the one we created earlier. Now let's run our application again. Open your terminal and run python app.py as before. When you visit the link, you should see the rendered HTML template in your browser. And there it is. We've successfully set up a route that renders an HTML template. It's that easy to get started with templates in Flask. Next, let's learn how to pass variables from Flask to HTML using Jinja2 templating. Jinja2 is the templating engine Flask uses, and it lets us inject Python variables right into our HTML templates. To start, we'll update our index.html file. Instead of just displaying a static message, let's make it dynamic by including placeholder for a variable. Here's what the updated index.html should look like. Notice the double brace name inside the HTML tag. This is how we can include a dynamic variable in our HTML. When Flask renders the template, it will replace the name variable with the value we pass from our Python code. Now let's head over to app.py file. We need to define the variable in Python and pass it to the template. Here is how we update the code. First, we define the variable called name and assign it the value Samuel Chidobe. This is just a string, but it could be any type of Python object. Next, we pass the name variable to the render_template function. We do this using the name equals name syntax, which tells Python, take this Python variable name and send it to the template as a variable named name. Once Flask sends the variable to the template, Jinja2 will replace the name with the value of the name variable, SamochDB in this case. Now let's run our application again by executing Python app.py. When we visit the page, Flask will render the template, replacing the name with SamochDB. And there it is. We've successfully passed a Python variable into our HTML template and displayed it using Jinja2. This is how you can make your web pages dynamic by passing values from Python into the template. Now let's take our templates to the next level by using conditionals and loops in Jinja2. This will allow us to dynamically control what gets displayed on our web page based on certain conditions or iterate through a list of items. We'll start by updating the index.html file to include both a conditional statement and a loop. Here is how the file will look after the updates. First, we'll have a conditional block using these tags. This block checks if the age variable is greater than 18. If it is, it displays the message you are an adult. Otherwise, it shows you are a minor. Then below that, we've added a loop using this tag. This loop iterates over the items list and creates a list item for each item in that list. So if we have item 1, item 2, and item 3 in our list, the loop will display them one by one on the page. Now let's update our app.py file to pass the necessary variables to the template. We need to send the name, age, and items variables from Python to the template so that they can be used in these conditionals and loops. Here we define a variable name and assign it the value SamochDB. We also define the age and set it to 25, which will be used in a conditional to check if the person is an adult or a minor. We then create a list called items, which contains 3 items, item 1, item 2, and item 3. This list will be passed to the template and used by the loop to generate the list items in the HTML. Finally, we'll pass all these variables to the render_template function. Name equals name, age equals age, and items equals item. This ensures that our HTML template will have access to these variables. Now let's run our application again by executing Python app.py. Once you refresh your browser, you should see the conditional message and the list of items rendered dynamically on the page. And there you have it. You've just added conditionals and loops to your Flask app, making your templates even more powerful and dynamic. Next, let's dive into handling forms and user inputs in Flask. Forms allows us to collect data from users, which we can then process in our app. To start, we'll update the index.html file to include a form where users can enter their username. Here's what we'll add to the HTML file. We've added a simple form with 2 elements, an input field where users can type in their username. The name equals username part of the inputs will allow us to reference this field when processing the form. A submit button that sends the form data when clicked. Notice that we've set the forms method to post. This tells Flask that we are sending data to the server as opposed to retrieving data with a get method. The forms action is set to be /, which means the data will be sent to the root route of our Flask app. Now let's move to the Python part. We need to update our app.py file to handle the form submission and process the data that the user enters. Here we import request along with render_template from Flask. The request object allows us to access the form data that the user submits. We update the routes to handle both get and post requests. This tells Flask to listen for both types of requests. Inside the route function, we use the if statement to check if the request is a post request, meaning the form has been submitted. If it is, we retrieve the username from the form using request.form in brackets username. Finally, we pass the username entered by the user to the template using render_template function. If no form is submitted, that is, the request is a get request, we should render the template with an empty name. Now let's run our application again by executing Python app.py. Once the form is submitted, the page will display the username entered by the user. And there you have it. You successfully handled a form submission in Flask and displayed user inputs dynamically on your page. And that's it. We've learned how to pass variables to HTML using Flask, use conditionals and loops in Jinja2 templates, and handle forms and user inputs in Flask. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more tutorials. If you want to learn more about Flask and web development, be sure to check out our upcoming tutorials. We'll be covering topics such as database integration, user authentication, and deployment. Don't miss out. Click the subscribe button and the notification bell to stay updated. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next tutorial.